Most online courses do not work, and there's a reason for that. It's because they focus too much on a very, very small section of your emotions. You are your mindset. There's nothing else. Your mindset controls everything. And the fundamental creativity, the fundamentals of this planet and this earth was created by human mindsets. And so I'm going to break down why this is really important. But when you look at all the data, 9% of people that take online courses don't have a long-term effect on their lives. In other words, you'll still find them in about a year's time in a similar or worse type positions. I'm not saying there's not a lot of learning going on, but when you look at a lot of these motivational speakers, these online courses that promise you the world, they really don't. What they do, they give you an instant dopamine hit. They bombard you with all these sales tricks of emails and this, and they're going to do this for you and impact your life, but it doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work, because they focus solely on a very small percentage of your mindset, which is your outer emotion. Humans have two emotions. There's your outer emotion and there's your inner emotion. Your outer emotion is what I call the superficial emotion. It's the pretend emotion. It's the acting emotion. It's what we show the world. It's 5% of who we are. So when you look at all these courses, what they're looking at, they're trying to fix your outer emotion. They're trying to fix the fundamentals of who you are, trying to kind of almost like feed you information and then follow a process. But it doesn't have a long-term impact on who you are, because 95% of who you are comes from your inner emotion. That's the fundamental emotion. That's who you are. That's who you know you are. That's who you know who you feel like, because you can't change that. You can't change that. And so what happens a lot is we try to control our outer emotion, which is only 5% of who we are. And so when you see a lot of people, they talk and they're happy and they're saying all these conversations and they're making up all these stories, or they're pretending to make up these stories and all this stuff, it's because they're really communicating to the outer world. It's what they want the outer world to see, but the internal, the 95%, the big, bulk, fundamental emotion is saying something completely different. There are 7 elements to this. Meditation is not enough. Meditation is really, really good and it's important, but it's not enough. And you'll see why. Doing exercises is not enough. There are 7 elements to this, and each and every one of them needs practice and training. I've developed through the deep learning education courses and through my AI, I've developed these practices that I've been trialing on with students, and they're having a 100% impact on them. And quite simply, there are 7 elements to your inner emotions, which is the fundamental emotion of your life. And if you don't practice, if you don't have exercise to nurture and practice these 7 elements, you're just then leaving it to chance. And it doesn't matter what your outer world does, you specifically need to nurture these in a deep learning way, not a superficial way. Superficial emotion is surface learning emotion. It's surface learning teaching. It's surface learning education. It's simply just reproducing information. Deep learning education is your inner emotion. It's your fundamental emotion, because you can't cheat it. It's solving problems towards an ecstatic desire. Number 1, finding that ecstatic desire, then creating a plan to get to that. Because let me tell you, 90% of the work is finding that ecstatic desire, which is what I teach. Finding that ecstatic desire is not just some kind of thing that you do, wake up one morning and say, you know what, I've got a passion for something, I like this, I like that. No, That in itself requires a skill, requires practice, requires a habit. And there's all these series of skills and practices you need to do daily to find that ecstatic desire. Because the moment you find that ecstatic desire, your life changes. Your life changes, every aspect of your life changes, and your inner emotion automatically just changes. Automatically, you'll see all the elements that are relevant to your inner emotion start to change. I've created an AI technology that's going to calculate the data that comes from your inner emotion. So as you track that data, it will be able to tell you what you are. And as you start to improve the 7 elements of your inner emotions as a deep learner, you will notice in the outer world, you start to grow and develop. Okay, so let's go through the 2 emotions. And I've just written this down. And let me start with the outer emotion. Okay, the outer emotion is a superficial emotion. It's what everyone sees. Okay, it's what you show to the world. Okay, and I call it the acting and pretending because it's only 5%. Okay, and it's only the 5% that we show because we pretend. Now, you may think that this is me, and it could be me, but fundamentally I am, like everyone else, fundamental. It's a fundamental emotion that's really me. And the only person that recognizes that, the only person that has a relationship with that is yourself, your one self. So the superficial emotion, and we tend to focus on that. And most courses, most motivational speakers, you see communication courses out there, all focusing on the superficial emotion, how you should talk, how you should act, finding the right words, the right sounds, all that. It's bullshit. Because what we're trying to do is find your deeper self. It's your deeper self that we're trying to find, not some superficial self, surface learned self. Let's act like robots and be like other people. No, you want to find your deeper self because your deeper self has that inner genius. And once we find that inner genius, then we start to build on that. But it's still you. Like I'm me, like everyone else is an individual. We're all different. We don't want to be like each other. We want to be different because our differences is what makes us great, what helps us solve problems of the future. Now, the fundamental emotion, which is your inner emotion, which is 95% of who you are, and that's the relationship you have with yourself. There's 7 elements. Love, security, self-reliance, recognition, self-value, creativity, and self-esteem. All these 7 elements make up your fundamental emotion. If you're not feeding, let me repeat that, if you're not feeding every single element needs to be fed. In other words, you need to be doing something a little bit of it every single day and calculating it. In other words, tracking it. Because this makes up your inner emotion. This makes up who you are. And once you elevate love, once you elevate your security, once you elevate your self-reliance, becoming independent, remember this, the less dependent you become on others, the happier you're going to get, the more successful you're going to get, the more you're going to grow. The more dependent you become on others for your happiness, for your growth, for anything that happens in your life, the worse you're going to get. The more anxiety kicks in, the more addictions kick in. Love is a fundamental. When you love, first of all, love yourself, and secondly, love others. When you have that love, that's genuine, and we work on that. It's not a matter of just saying, I'm in love, I love this, No, there's practices that we put in place as deep learners. The key here is deep learning education, not a surface learning. So when we nurture, when we pour water like a garden on our element, our fundamental element of love, we mean it. Love for ourselves, we have to love ourselves, and then we have to love others. And again, the specific deep learning practices that I've created, and it's working 100% with my students, that's automatically changing lives. Security. We need to feel secure. We need to feel secure in ourselves. And how do we feel secure in ourselves? The more secure we feel, the better we are in terms of our emotions. When we're feeling insecure, there's a lot of reason why we feel insecure, and more times than not is because our values dropping of who we are. When we feel less active, when we're doing less actions, absence of an ecstatic desire, for example, makes you feel insecure. When you're insecure, you feel vulnerable, which means you become dependent on others. And so we've got practices in place, and I've created specific practices and also the way to measure that through data. In other words, you get a point system, becomes like a game, and you have to reach a certain score. And what I'm saying, you then start to see every element of your fundamental, because you elevate your fundamental emotion, you're elevating your life 100%. I can tell you this right now. No person in the world can do this. You elevate your fundamental emotions, and there's 7 elements to this. You're changing your life. And the thing is, the data won't lie, because as we're calculating and analysing the data, I can see if your data's low, the data's telling you, well, listen, you're still here because the data's showing it. But if the data starts to rise, if the love element starts to rise, the security element, self-reliance, and keep talking about independence, recognition, being recognised for our work. So in other words, when people come and say, I'm enjoying what you're doing, I love what you're doing. When you've got mentors and they're recognising your work, recognising we like that, our fundamental emotion loves that. So that makes us want to do more, want to do better. It's good to get people to recognise us. And so again, it's a skill set. So all these stuff, love, security, self-reliance, recognition, self-value, they're all skill sets and all practices. It's not just something that you do overnight. It's not just something that we just kind of do and make ourselves feel good. That's superficial. That's external. It's what we do internally that matters. So self-value, again, going back to the deep learning education practices, as we're solving problems towards our ecstatic desire, every time we solve a problem, every time we overcome something, every time we fail and then we overcome that failure, our self-value to the market is growing and developing. People are starting to recognize our value. And remember this, when your self-value grows and you know that your value is growing and growing, and then people are going to want to pay you for that. I'm seeing a lot of my students and they're getting paid for the work they're doing because they've increased their self-value. And when people want to chase you and demand for your services and because you're increasing value, in other words, you're solving problems that other people can't, because you're building on every single one of these elements. Every single one of these elements become a skill set. And as you grow, as you're starting to grow and develop, you pick up the habits. And remember this, without creating habit, not much changes in the life. So it doesn't matter how often you do these practices, you've got to do them every day. That's the key. That's the key to long-term growth. And that's the key to changing your fundamental emotion. Because if you can't change your fundamental emotions, if you're not doing every single one of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The other one, creativity. When you're a deep learner, you are forced to be creative. You are forced to solve problems where you don't have the skill, sense, and knowledge to do so. Hence, you're forced to be creative. You're forced to think outside the square, forced to research more, to action more. Remember, it's all about actioning. And all of a sudden, sometimes when we action and we fail and then we reflect, that's where creativity comes into it. So the human brain, especially the fundamental emotion, needs creativity. If you're playing it safe, If you're just being too comfortable and taking it easy, not taking any risks, because you know what, you don't want to make a mistake, it's very difficult to be creative. You speak to some of the greatest actors and some of the greatest actors that have written these amazing books. They will tell you about creativity, how they take risks, big risks, even against the direction of the director, because it's about being creative. The human brain needs creativity. And this is also, I've created very specific practices that can help you nurture this. And finally, self-esteem. How you feel about yourself, what you're thinking about yourself, feeling great about yourself and who you are and what you are. How you feel about yourself is fundamental, because if you're feeling low about yourself, it's very, very difficult for you to elevate yourself. But we have practices in place, and I've created practices in place for each and every one as deep learners, because it's only as a deep learner, through deep learning education, through specific practices, that you can elevate your fundamental emotion. And if you elevate your fundamental emotion, you're in that level of joyfulness and ecstasy. And when your brain is at that moment of joyfulness and ecstasy, and you can only ever do this by elevating love, by elevating your security, by elevating self-reliance, by elevating recognition, by elevating self-value, by elevating creativity, by elevating self-esteem. As all this grows, your brain is moving into joyfulness and ecstasy. And when your brain moves to joyfulness and ecstasy and stays there for a long time, guess what? You're in genius territory. And guess what? When you're in genius territory, you're changing the world.